The city lights were bright, but for her they only showed the darkness in her heart. She walked slowly on the crowded street, holding her small child's hand tightly. The child looked hungry, his eyes tired, his clothes too old for the cold night. She tried to hide her pain, but her steps were heavy. She was an alien widow, and no one wanted to see her. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes watching her. Some people whispered, some laughed, some turned their faces away. She was used to this, but today the pain was sharper, because today she was not walking only for herself. She was walking for her child. Her child needed food, safety, and hope, and she had none to give. She stopped at a bakery shop. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. Her child's eyes grew wide, but she pulled him close. She entered and asked softly, "Please, do you need help here?" The baker frowned, shook his head, and said, "No jobs for your kind." The words hit her like cold water. She lowered her head, whispered thanks, and left. She went to another shop, then another, then another. At each place, the answer was the same. Sometimes they didn't even listen to her. Sometimes they laughed at her broken shoes. Sometimes they told her, "Go back where you belong." But she had no place to go back to. Her husband was gone. Her world destroyed. Her family buried under silence. The child asked quietly, "Mama, why they don't want you?" Her heart broke, but she forced a weak smile. She said, "Maybe tomorrow will be better." But even she did not believe her own words. She remembered her husband, his strong hands, his gentle voice. He had worked in the human factory, long hours, hard work but always with hope. One night there was an explosion, fire, and screams. The humans called it an accident, but no one cared to check. She buried him with nothing, not even justice. Since then, doors had closed, hearts had turned hard. She was alone, only her child beside her. The streets grew darker. The cold wind bit her skin. Her child stumbled from hunger and she picked him up. Her body was weak, but her love gave her strength. She whispered to herself, "I cannot stop. I must find something. I must." She reached the city center. Lights shining, music playing, people laughing, but all that joy was not for her. She felt like a shadow moving through their bright world, a shadow no one wanted near. Still, she knocked on one more door. This time it was a clothing shop, warm and clean inside. The shopkeeper looked at her for only 1 second before saying, "Leave." No chance to explain, no chance to beg. She stepped back, fighting tears. Her child pressed his face into her dress and whispered, "Mama, I am hungry." Her arms trembled as she held him tighter. Her tears finally fell. But she turned away so he would not see. She could not let him believe she was weak. But inside her heart, she felt like breaking. She asked herself, why does no one care? Why is kindness so rare? She walked past tall buildings, her shadow stretching long in the streetlights. Each step felt heavier, each breath colder. The world seemed ready to crush her. She thought, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should sit on the street and wait for the end. But when she looked at her child's small face, she knew she could not give up. She kept moving, even without hope. Finally, she reached an old corner of the city. The lights here were weaker. The streets, quieter. She thought maybe she would find a place to rest even for a few hours. She leaned against a wall, closed her eyes for a moment, and then she heard a voice. "Wait," the voice said, gentle but firm. She opened her eyes and saw a human man standing in the doorway of a small shop. He was not rich, his clothes simple, his eyes tired. But, unlike the others, he was looking at her without hate. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. He asked, "Do you need help?" Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but words failed her. No one had asked her that in years. Her child peeked from behind her, staring at the man. The man bent slightly, smiled softly at the child. He said again, "Do you need help? Maybe I can give you some work." Her heart raced. Her mind was full of fear and doubt. Was this real, or was it another cruel joke? But there was something in his eyes, something different, not pity, not judgment, but something warmer. For the first time, she felt a small spark of hope, a tiny light in the endless night of her struggle, and she whispered, "Please, yes, I need a job." Her voice was broken, but her spirit was still alive. The man nodded slowly as if he already knew her answer. The child's eyes lit up, and the night did not feel so cold anymore. But in the darkness, behind them, unseen eyes still watched, waiting. The night was quiet and the street was almost empty. The alien widow stood frozen in front of the small shop, her child leaning against her side. The human man's voice still echoed in her ears. "Maybe I can give you some work." No one had spoken to her like that in years. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. The shop itself looked old and tired, its windows dusty, its sign half broken. Inside, faint light glowed from a single lantern. Shelves leaned heavy with forgotten goods and the smell of wood mixed with dried herbs. This was not a place of wealth or power. It was a place where time moved slowly, where people did not often come. "Ew." Man stepped aside and held the door open. He said, "Come in, it is cold outside." Her body tensed, her mind raced. She did not know if she could trust him. Every door she had opened before had pushed her away. Why was this one different? Her child tugged at her dress and whispered, "Mama, please, I am tired." Her heart ached. She could not keep him standing in the cold. So with heavy steps, she entered the shop. The man closed the door gently behind them. Inside, the warmth was faint but enough to ease the child's shivers. He pulled out a chair for her, though it was cracked and old. She sat down slowly, still keeping her child on her lap. The man walked to the counter, searching through a pile of papers and tools. Finally, he turned back and said, "I run this shop alone. It is hard work, cleaning, stocking, carrying goods." He looked at her directly, his eyes steady. "I could use help." She almost laughed, but not with joy. No one trusted her. No one wanted her near. Why would this man be different? Her voice was low, almost broken, as she asked, "Why me? You know what I am." The words tasted bitter. The man nodded slowly, as if he had expected the question. He said, "I know you are an alien. I know you are a widow, but I also see you are a mother." His eyes shifted to the child. "And mothers do not stop. They fight for their children." His words pierced through her like sunlight breaking heavy clouds. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. The child looked at the man with wide eyes, not fear but curiosity. The man continued, "I have seen you walk these streets, always searching, always hoping, while others only turn away." He sighed. "People fear what they do not know. They look for easy hate instead of hard kindness." Then his voice grew firmer. "But I do not care what they say. I need help and you need work, so maybe we can help each other." Her heart beat faster, a mix of relief and fear. She wanted to believe him, but trust was dangerous. She had trusted before, and it had cost her everything. Still, his eyes did not hold lies. They held a quiet strength she had not seen in a long time. She whispered, "If they see me working here, they will not like it." The man nodded. "I know." There was no hesitation in his answer, only calm truth. She whispered again, "They will hate you too." His mouth curved into a small, tired smile. "They already do." For a moment, silence filled the shop, broken only by the faint sound of the lantern flame. The widow looked down at her child, who had rested his head on, her chest already half asleep. Her heart softened, her arms tightened around him. If this was her one chance, could she risk saying no? She took a deep breath and said, "I will work if you are sure." The man nodded firmly. "Then it is settled." He handed her a small cloth bag. Inside were 2 pieces of bread and a little cheese. "Eat first," he said. "Work comes after strength." Her eyes filled with tears, her voice too weak to answer. She had begged in so many places, and no one gave her even crumbs, yet this stranger gave her food before even taking her labor. She broke the bread into 2 pieces, gave the larger one to her child. The child ate quickly, smiling for the first time in days. The man watched silently. then turned back to his counter. But his eyes were not empty. They carried a weight. Something about him seemed heavier than his quiet shop, as if he too had been carrying his own invisible wounds. When the child finally slept, the widow asked softly, "Why do you trust me?" The man did not look up. He just said, "Because no one trusted me once, and I know how it feels." The words struck deep into her heart. She wanted to ask more, but his face told her that his story was locked away, at least for now. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering thanks inside her heart. But outside, on the empty street, shadows gathered. Unseen eyes had followed her into this shop. Whispers spread in the night. Questions rose among the cruel. Why is he helping her? What is he hiding? The city would not stay quiet for long, and while she felt hope for the first time, danger was already moving closer. Morning came slowly to the quiet shop. The widow woke early, her child still sleeping on a small blanket in the corner. She looked around the dusty shelves, the broken counter, the faint smell of herbs and wood. This was not a grand place, but to her it felt safer than the streets. She touched her child's hair gently and whispered, "Maybe this is the beginning." The human shopkeeper entered from the back. Carrying a box of goods, he nodded at her, silent but not unkind. "Work is simple," he said. "Clean the shelves, arrange the jars, keep the place in order." His words were plain, but his tone was steady. She nodded quickly, ready to do anything. All day she worked with quiet hands. Her child followed her, sometimes sweeping with a tiny broom, sometimes just watching. The man spoke little, but when he did, his words were never harsh. He was different, and she could not stop wondering, why? Yet outside, whispers grew. Some customers came in, saw her behind the counter and left without buying. Others stared, shaking their heads. The human man ignored them, but she could feel the weight of their eyes. Every look reminded her she was not welcome. Late in the evening, when the shop grew empty, she stepped outside for air. The street was quiet, the sky painted with dying sunlight. That was when she heard it. Two men talking at the corner, their voices sharp. She froze, hiding in the shadow of the shop's wall. Their words cut into her heart. One man said, "Do you remember that factory fire? The alien man who died?" The other laughed darkly. "Yes, they called it an accident, but everyone knows the truth." Her breath caught. Her body trembled. She pressed her hand to her mouth, afraid to make a sound. The first man whispered. He found something, some secret in the machines. They silenced him before he could speak. The second spat on the ground. "That's what happens when you dig too deep." And now his widow walks the streets like a beggar. They both laughed, their voices cruel. Her heart broke again, but this time with fury burning inside. Her husband's death had not been fate. It had been murder. She stumbled back into the shop, her face pale. The man looked at her and frowned. What happened? Her lips trembled, but she could not hold the truth inside. "They killed him," she whispered. "My husband. It was not an accident." Her voice shook. Her hands gripped the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Are you sure?" he asked, calm but serious. She nodded quickly, tears falling. "I heard them. They said he found something. He was silenced." Her words spilled like broken glass, sharp and painful. For a moment, silence filled the shop. The man leaned against the counter, staring at the floor. Finally, he said, "If this is true, then you are in more danger than you know." Her stomach turned, her arms tightened around her child. She whispered, "What should I do?" The man looked at her, his eyes heavy. "You cannot trust the people outside, not with this truth." He paused, then added, "But maybe I can help you find out what really happened." Her eyes widened, shocked by his offer. She asked, "Why would you risk this? It is not your fight." He sighed deeply, his gaze distant. "Because lies spread like poison, and I have lived with enough of them." He did not explain more. But she felt his words carried scars. Something in his past tied him to her pain, something he was not ready to share. That night she could not sleep. She lay on the blanket beside her child, listening to the wind press against the windows. Her husband's face haunted her, his smile, his hands, the promise he made to keep them safe. Now she knew the truth, and the truth was heavier than grief. It was not only loss, it was injustice. She whispered to herself, "I will not let them erase him. I will not let his death be forgotten." Her child stirred in his sleep, and she kissed his forehead softly. She knew she was small, powerless, but inside her heart a fire had begun to burn. And once a fire starts, it cannot be hidden forever. The next morning, as she cleaned the shelves, a group of men entered the shop. They did not buy anything, they only looked at her with cold eyes. One of them smirked and said, "Strange choice of helper you have here." The shopkeeper met their gaze calmly. "She works, that is enough." The men laughed and left, but their eyes promised trouble. Her hands shook as she wiped the counter. The man said quietly, "Do not fear, their words are empty, for now." But she could see in his eyes he knew danger was coming. She whispered, "If they know what I heard, they will not stop." The man nodded slowly. "Then we must be careful." Outside, the city moved as always. Shops opened, children played, people gossiped. But beneath the surface, shadows moved, secrets hid. And in one small, dusty shop, an alien widow and a quiet human had just stepped into a path of danger, a path that could uncover the truth or destroy them both. The days passed slowly, yet each one carried more tension than the last. The widow worked hard in the little shop, cleaning shelves, sorting goods, serving customers who glared but never smiled. The human shopkeeper stood firm beside her, never once asking her to leave. But outside, whispers grew louder and the air grew colder. Something dark was watching, waiting. Her child was her only light, his laughter small but precious. He played quietly in the corner with scraps of paper and old wooden blocks. Sometimes he hummed to himself, little songs his father once sang. Hearing them always filled her eyes with tears, but she never stopped him. His voice was the only music her broken heart could bear. One evening, when the sky was turning red with sunset, the shop grew quiet. The man had stepped outside to collect supplies, leaving her and the child alone. She turned to organize the jars on the highest shelf. When she turned back, her child was gone. Her heart froze, her breath caught. She called his name, her voice sharp with fear. She searched behind the counter, under the tables, but he was not there. She ran to the door, looked down the street, and saw nothing. The world blurred, her legs shook. She stumbled into the street, screaming his name. People turned to look, but quickly turned away. No one wanted to help an alien widow. She shouted again, her throat burning, her heart breaking. Her child was missing, stolen from her sight in a single moment. The shopkeeper heard her cries and came running. He grabbed her arms, steadying her trembling body. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice tight with fear. "My child, he is gone," she gasped, pointing to the empty shop. The man's face hardened, his eyes scanning the streets. Together they searched, running down alleys, calling his name. The night grew, darker, shadows stretching long and deep. Every sound made her heart jump. The rustle of leaves, the scrape of footsteps, the laugh of strangers. But none of them were her child. Her tears fell like rain, but she did not stop. Finally, in a narrow alley, they heard a small sound, a weak cry almost too soft to hear. The widow's heart leapt, she rushed forward. There, behind a pile of broken crates, was her child. He was safe but trembling, clutching something in his tiny hands. She fell to her knees, pulling him close, kissing his hair again and again. Her tears wet his face, but he smiled weakly. "Mama, I was scared," he whispered, his little voice shaking. She held him tighter, whispering, "I am here. I am here, never again." The shopkeeper knelt beside them, his eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. "Someone left him here," he said, his voice low. This was not an accident. The widow looked down and saw what her child was holding. It was a small metal object, strange and old, glowing faintly with blue light. She stared, confused and afraid. "Where did you get this?" she asked softly. The child answered, "A man gave it to me. He said it belonged to Papa." Her heart stopped. Her blood ran cold. The shopkeeper took the object carefully, turning it in his hands. It was no toy, no simple machine. It was something dangerous, something hidden. The widow remembered the whispers she had heard. Her husband had found something in the factory, something worth killing for. Was this the secret he had died protecting? She looked at the object, then at her child. Fear and hope twisted together inside her chest. The shopkeeper said firmly, "This device could be proof of what really happened." The widow's hands shook. "If they know we have it, they will come for us." He nodded. "They already have." His eyes narrowed. The child was taken to deliver this message, to warn us, but also to tempt us. The widow hugged her child tighter, as if her arms alone could protect him from the world. The night air grew heavier, silence pressing on them from every side. The shopkeeper whispered, "We must be careful now. We must decide, run or fight." The widow lifted her head, her eyes still wet but burning with fire. "I will not run anymore," she said, her voice steady though her body trembled. "They took my husband. They tried to take my child. They will not take the truth." The shopkeeper looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly but firmly. "Then we stand together," he said, his voice like iron. In that dark alley, with the faint glow of the strange device between them, a promise was made, a promise that would change both their lives forever. But in the distance, unseen by them, a shadow watched. Eyes glimmered in the dark, lips curved into a cruel smile. The game had begun, and the hunters would not stop until the widow and her child were silenced, and the secret her husband died for was buried forever. The strange device rested on the wooden counter, glowing faint blue in the dim light of the shop. The widow stared at it as if it were alive. Her child clung to her arm, his small fingers tight with fear. The shopkeeper stood close, his face hard, his eyes fixed on the object. Silence filled the room, heavy and unbroken, until finally the widow whispered, This is what he died for." Her heart trembled, her breath unsteady. Memories of her husband's smile rushed back, his tired hands coming home from the factory, his quiet promise that one day things would be better. But instead of better, there had been fire, smoke, and silence. Now she understood. He had found something so dangerous that the powerful had chosen to kill him rather than let the truth out. The child pointed to the device, his voice soft. "Papa told me once, machines can hide secrets." Her throat closed, she pulled him close, tears rising. She had thought his words were only dreams, but now they felt like warnings. Warnings left behind for her and for this child who carried his father's hope. The shopkeeper leaned closer, turning the object slowly in his hands. It was a small box, no bigger than his palm, marked with tiny lines that glowed faintly. Not human design, yet not fully alien either. It looked like a key, a record, and a weapon all at once, he murmured. "If this contains proof, it could change everything," the widow whispered. "But proof is dangerous." Her eyes searched his face, looking for answers, for guidance. "If they killed him for holding it, what will they do to us?" Her voice broke, fear and anger colliding in her chest. The shopkeeper met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "They will come, but we cannot hide forever." That night, they sat together at the counter, the lantern flickering low. The widow held her child close as the shopkeeper tried to open the device. At first, nothing happened. Then a soft hum filled the air. Light spilled out, weaving lines across the wall like a map of stars. The widow gasped. The child's eyes grew wide. The map shifted, revealing images, broken machines, chemical leaks, human supervisors signing secret documents. Her heart pounded, her hands shook. This was no accident. This was no mistake. Her husband had discovered the factory was poisoning workers using illegal fuel, hiding deaths and calling them accidents. The images showed faces, names, signatures, evidence too powerful to deny. Her tears fell, but not only from sorrow. They fell from rage, from the truth finally standing clear. She whispered, "He wanted the world to know he died trying to protect this." The child buried his face against her chest, whispering, "Papa was brave." She kissed his hair, whispering, "Back." "Yes, my love, he was brave, and so must we be." The shopkeeper's jaw tightened, his hands closing the device carefully. "This cannot stay here," he said, his voice low but sharp. "They will search for it. They will search for you. They will burn this shop if they must." He placed the device into a small wooden box and locked it. "We must think carefully. Who will believe us? Who will dare stand with us?" The widow shook her head. "No one believes me. No one ever listens." Her voice was bitter, cracked with years of rejection. The shopkeeper leaned closer, his tone firm. "Then they must believe the truth, not just your words." He tapped the wooden box. "This speaks louder than fear." But outside the shop, the world was already stirring. Men whispered in alleys. Shadows moved behind doors. Some had already guessed the widow carried something more than grief. The hunters were ready, and they were closing in. That night, as the widow tried to sleep, she dreamed of her husband. He stood in the smoke of the burning factory, his hand reaching for her. But no sound left his lips, only silence and fire. She woke trembling, clutching her child tighter. She whispered to herself, "I will not let your death be forgotten." The shopkeeper sat by the lantern, eyes never leaving the locked box. He did not sleep. He did not blink for long. He knew. Eyes were watching them. He knew danger was near. But he also knew something else. He was no longer alone. Her fight had become his fight, her pain his burden. At dawn, a stone crashed through the shop window. Glass shattered. The child screamed. The widow pulled him close. The shopkeeper rushed to the door but found only darkness outside. On the stone was a piece of paper. The words scrawled in black ink. "Stop searching, or next time it will not be your window." The widow's hands shook, her body weak. But inside, her heart burned brighter. She held her child close, then looked at the shopkeeper. "They will not stop, will they?" she whispered. He shook his head, his face grim. "No, they will not." She lifted her chin, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then neither will we." Her child clung to her dress, his small eyes filled with fear but also pride. The shopkeeper nodded slowly. "Then it is decided. We protect the truth, no matter the cost." Outside, the city looked calm, but war had already begun. Not a war of armies, but a war of silence and truth. And at the center of it stood a poor, alien widow, her child, and one human who dared to stand with them. Together, they held the secret that could break the chains of lies, or bury them all beneath the weight of power. The broken window was quickly covered with wood, but the fear inside the shop could not be covered. The widow sat with her child in her arms, her eyes red from sleepless nights. The strange device, locked safely in its box, felt heavier than stone. It carried not only the truth of her husband's death but also the weight of danger pressing closer every day. The shopkeeper moved quietly, repairing shelves, keeping the shop open, pretending all was normal. But his eyes always searched the streets, his ears always listened for footsteps. He knew the walls were thin, and whispers could pass through them like wind. The widow felt it too, the sense of being hunted, watched, judged. Every knock on the door made her heart race. She told herself she could not carry this alone. She thought of someone, an old neighbor. From her early days in the city, a woman who once gave her bread when no one else would. That memory of kindness returned like light in darkness. "If anyone will help us," the widow whispered, "it will be her." The shopkeeper did not trust easily. His face tightened when she spoke of it. "Secrets are dangerous," he said. "Trust the wrong person, and it could be the end." But the widow's heart longed for an ally, someone who might share the burden against his warning. She took her child in the small box and she went to find the neighbor. The woman welcomed her warmly, smiling wide, opening her door without hesitation. Her house smelled of fresh bread and tea. Her voice carried gentle notes. The widow felt her heart soften, her fear ease for the first time in weeks. She explained everything, the whispers, the factory, the device that held the truth. Tears filled her eyes as she said, "They killed him for this, and now they will come for me too." The neighbor held her hand, nodding slowly. "You are brave," she whispered. "Your husband would be proud." Her words felt like comfort, like safety wrapping around her tired body. For a moment, the widow believed she had found true help. She left the box with the neighbor, thinking it would be safer hidden away from the shop. But that night, the betrayal revealed itself. Men in black coats stormed into the shop, smashing the door wide. The widow woke with a scream, clutching her child. The shopkeeper rushed forward, with a wooden staff striking hard, fighting to keep them back. But the men were many, their eyes filled with cold hatred. One of them shouted, "Where is it? Where is the box?" Her blood turned cold, her knees weak. How did they know? How could they have found out? The answer stabbed her heart. Her neighbor, her only hope, had betrayed her. The kindness was only a mask, the warmth only a trap. The men searched the shop, overturning shelves, smashing jars, scattering goods across the floor. Her child screamed, hiding behind her dress. The shopkeeper fought fiercely, striking again and again, but he was outnumbered. A heavy blow sent him crashing to the ground. Blood staining his shirt, the widow cried out, rushing to his side. One man lifted his knife, pointing at the child. Her heart nearly stopped. Her scream filled the room. "Please, not him," she begged, falling to her knees. The man sneered. "Then tell us where it is." Her lips shook. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced between fear and courage. The shopkeeper, weak but still alive, whispered, "Do not tell them." His voice was faint but strong. The widow's tears streamed down her face. Her child's small hand clutched hers tightly. The men pressed closer, their shadows long, their weapons sharp. But in her heart, something changed. She had begged before, she had cried before, she had been silent before, and silence had killed her husband. Silence had starved her child. Silence had chained her life. Now she rose slowly, her back straight, her eyes burning. "With fire, you want it?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the broken shop. "Then you will have to kill me first." The men hesitated, surprised by her sudden defiance. Her child clung to her side, trembling, but looking up at her with wide eyes. The shopkeeper forced himself to his knees, blood on his lips. "And you will have to kill me too," he said, his voice iron despite his pain. For a long moment, silence stretched. Then the leader spat on the ground, motioned to his men. "Not tonight," he muttered, "but this is not over." They left the shop broken, the door hanging loose, the shelves shattered. But the widow, her child, and the shopkeeper were still alive. The widow fell beside the shopkeeper, tears mixing with dust and blood. She whispered, "I trusted the wrong one." He placed a weak hand on hers. "Now you know, betrayal always hides behind smiles." His eyes softened. "But you are stronger than you believe." The child touched her face, whispering, "Mama, you were brave." Her heart broke and healed all at once. For the first time, she felt not only grief but also courage. They had tried to silence her again, but she had refused. And in that refusal, a new strength was born. The shop was broken, the walls cracked, the shelves empty. But the fire inside her heart was brighter than ever. She whispered to herself, "They will not win, I will not let them." And the shopkeeper, weak but smiling faintly, answered, "Then we fight together." Outside, the night was thick with silence, but in the darkness new enemies were gathering. The betrayal had shown them how close danger stood, and soon, the final battle for truth would begin. The shop was broken, its windows shattered, its shelves empty, its walls scarred with violence. But inside, the widow, her child, and the shopkeeper still stood. Their bodies were weak, but their hearts had found new strength. The hunters had not won, and the truth still lived in the small glowing device. The widow knew they could not stay hidden any longer. Every shadow outside carried danger. Every whisper on the street carried betrayal. If they held the secret in silence, it would die with them. But if they revealed it to the world, it could bring justice. Her husband's death would no longer be forgotten. The shopkeeper sat at the counter, his shirt still stained with blood, his face pale but steady. He said, "We cannot trust neighbors. We cannot trust friends. We cannot trust whispers." His voice grew stronger. "But we can trust the truth, and we can trust each other." The widow nodded, her eyes burning with both fear and fire. She whispered, "Then we show them. We show everyone." The child sat quietly, holding the wooden box with both hands. His small fingers clutched it as if he carried the weight of the whole world. He whispered, "Papa wanted them to know." The widow kissed his hair and said, "Yes, my love. And now we will finish what he started." At dawn, they left the broken shop behind. The streets were cold. People stared as they passed, some whispering, some laughing, some glaring with hate. But the widow did not lower her head. For the first time, she walked with her shoulders straight, her step steady. The shopkeeper walked beside her, silent but strong. They went to the central hall of the city, a place where announcements and news were shared, a place where crowds always gathered. The widow's heart pounded, her hands shook, but she held the box tightly. She whispered to the shopkeeper. "Once I open this, there is no turning back," he answered firmly. There was never any turning back. When the bell rang, the crowd filled the square. Merchants, workers, mothers, children, officials all gathered. The widow stepped onto the platform, her child holding her hand, the shopkeeper behind her. Gasps filled the air, whispers rushed. Like waves, "What is she doing here? That alien widow, how dare she stand there?" Her knees trembled, but she did not move away. She raised the box, opened it slowly, and the device glowed. A hum filled the air, and suddenly light burst across the walls of the hall. Images spread like fire. The factory, the machines, the chemicals, the secret documents, the men signing their names. The truth shone bright, undeniable, unbreakable. The crowd gasped, their whispers turning to shouts. "This cannot be true. They lied to us. So many died for this." Faces turned pale, anger rose like storm clouds. The widow's voice broke the noise, trembling but strong. "They killed my husband for this secret. They tried to silence me. They tried to take my child, but the truth cannot be buried." Her child clung to her side, his small voice suddenly ringing out. "Papa was brave, and Mama is brave too." The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, and in that silence her words carried weight. The shopkeeper stepped forward, his voice deep. "You all turned your backs on her, but she stood. She carried the truth when no one else would." The officials in the hall tried to stop the device, shouting for guards, but it was too late. The images had already burned into the eyes of the people. The truth spread faster than lies, breaking chains of silence. The guards hesitated, torn between orders and what they had just seen. The people's voices grew louder, demanding justice, demanding answers. The powerful men who had hidden behind walls now stood exposed, their names lit across the screen, their signatures tied to crimes. The crowd roared with fury, and even the guards turned against them. For once, the widow did not feel small. She felt the weight of her husband's spirit beside her, proud and strong. The officials were dragged from the hall, their shouts drowned by the anger of the people. The widow fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Her child hugged her tightly, whispering, "Mama, you did it." The shopkeeper placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his eyes soft. "No," he said gently. "You did it." For the first time since her husband's death, she felt free. Not free from sorrow, not free from struggle, but free from silence, free from the chains of lies. The crowd no longer looked at her with hate. They looked with respect, some even with shame for turning away before. Days later, the shop was repaired, its windows shining once more. People came not to mock, but to offer thanks, to ask for forgiveness. The widow worked again, her child smiling, his laughter brighter. And beside her the shopkeeper stood, not only as an ally, but as family. One quiet evening, as the sun set in golden light, the child looked up at the shopkeeper. His voice was soft but filled with hope. "Are you my new father?" The man paused, his eyes wide. Then he smiled gently. He looked at the widow and she nodded through tears, and in that moment, their broken pieces came together into something new. The city was still flawed, shadows still lingered, but the truth had won its place and courage had lit the way. And in a small shop, once forgotten, now filled with hope, an alien widow, her child, and one human had built a new beginning. Not out of power, but out of love, trust, and the courage to stand for what was right.